You might as well say he was homeless because that's how hungry he played and how much heart and determination he played with. He was always trying to get better, to the point that he cut everything and everyone off. It was just, he had a vision, he had a goal in mind, and that was it. That was the end all be all. He played like every game was his last. Every workout was going to be his last. He would outwill people, man. His will was just unmatched. That was a quote from Donny Carr, one of Kobe Bryant's rivals from high school. This is from the book Showboat, Life of Kobe Bryant by Roland Lazenby. Honestly, such a great book. It was one of the first books that I read when I started on this journey of reading about legends. And you can see I took so many. There's so many highlights in this book. Like it was a great book. So what I've tried to do is try to strip out some of the key moments in Kobe's life, some of the attributes and qualities that made the man. Things like his, he had a relentless work ethic. He had an obsession for winning, and he was so competitive. There's some great stories in this book that show how competitive he was and how obsessed he was with getting better and self improvement. And he was just hungry, and the amount of self belief and confidence this guy had was unbelievable, honestly. And there are a lot of comparisons in this book with Michael Jordan, similarities and some differences, but let's get started with what made Kobe Bryant. So one of the things that with all legends, their parents have a lot of influence. One of the defining factors in Kobe's life was his parents' influence and the perfectionism from his mother, and his dad was also an NBA player, and that kind of shaped Kobe's upbringing. They would move around a lot because of his dad's playing for different teams. So that's where he learned basketball. But behind the man was the mother. So a lot of people know that he was close to his dad, but it was actually his mum who shaped his mentality. While Joe Bryant was on the road, that was his dad, also known as Jelly Bean. Kobe spent a lot of the early years with Pam. Kobe Bryant would later be known for the basketball bond with his father, but with the father's celebrity and the frequent travel of a professional athlete during the son's formative years, it was understandable that Kobe Bean's earliest and closest bond would form with Pam Bryant. His sisters would brand Kobe as an incurable mama's boy. Thus, his son mirrored much of Pam's personality, far from the happy-go-lucky countenance of his father. And then Kobe said this in 9. From the enthusiasm aspect, his love to play, I'm more like my father, but on the court, I'm more like my mother. She's more like a pit bull. Her temper is like that. And he smacked his hands together to make a sharp crack. Very competitive, so I got the best of both worlds. And then Tex Winter, one of the coaches that coached both Jordan and Kobe, said that there's one trait that they shared among all others, above all others, and that was this. The primary driving element, however, was the perfectionism. Tex Winter, the veteran coach who worked so closely with both Jordan and Bryant, would often say it was chief among the many fundamental traits the two superstars shared, their intense perfectionism. In terms of Bryant's achievement, it's fair to say in so many ways, the mother made the man. And so, well, the mother made the man, he gathered a lot of lessons as well from his dad. And he followed his dad's career very closely right from when he was a kid. He'd be on the court mopping the floors. He'd be on the team bus. So he learned a lot from his dad. But the key difference between Kobe and Joe was that Joe was never the star, and Kobe learned from that. And there was something that he never wanted to be, and that was not to be the star. When you speak of Magic Johnson, you're speaking of one of the greatest players who ever played, and Joe was nowhere near that. Gene Shue offered. Looking back, Joe did have some of those similarities in his game. He was more of an outside player. He could handle the ball, he could pass the ball, but Joe in his pro career was never the man, never the guy where you would say, okay Joe, we want you doing this all the time. Never the man. It was a phrase that would haunt Joe Bryant's career and an idea that would fuel his son to do the opposite. I just want to be the man. Kobe Bryant would say over and over again during the early years of his career, and it's a phrase that comes up over and over again in the book. This idea of always wanting to be the man, of almost being selfish, and we'll come to that later as well, but having selfish play and always trying to be the match winner is something that, Kobe loved being the star of the show, let's just put it that way. And so a lot of this love and this obsession for basketball started early in his life when his family moved into Italy. Kobe is 3, but he loves basketball already. He runs down the hallway, hops on his little trampoline, and slams his mini basketball through an 8-foot high hoop. Apparently, he had hijacked the trampoline from his sisters. Years later, both girls maintained that their brother was already working on his left hand at that same age. He would run around the house dribbling the basketball. I wanted him to be a doctor, Big Joe remembered. That was his grandfather. And then Kobe would say, "Pop, pop, I want to be a basketball player." And then I would say, "You'll get all tired and sweaty playing basketball." Then Kobe responded, "Pop, pop, that's what basketball players are supposed to do. Get tired and sweaty." So he already had this understanding. And you know what's really interesting, that he's already working on his left hand. So he's predominantly right-handed, but he was already working on his weaker hand. And that definitely played a part in later on in his career, because he could dribble with both. And so by the time he was a teenager, he was back in Philadelphia with his family, and he played in the Sunny Hill League. And so there was a counsellor in the Sunny Hill League who was reviewing the applications and saw that under career plans, Kobe had put NBA. In one of his early seasons in the league, a counsellor who was scanning the player applications looking for problems noticed that under career plans, Kobe had listed NBA. The answer represented just the kind of unrealistic attitude the league wanted to guard against. For the Hill League, basketball was the carrot used to lure boys away from the treacherous pitfalls of Philadelphia's streets. The game itself was certainly prized, but the emphasis was on a realistic future. The counsellor had seen answers like this before. In fact, they were just about all like this. Many players believed they were headed for the NBA's huge glory and even huger paychecks, so the counsellor made it a point to admonish Kobe. "Only 1 in a million make it to the NBA," the counsellor said, "so you have to plan on a future other than basketball." And then Kobe replied, "I'm going to be that 1 in a million." After all, he explained, Magic Johnson had done it, Michael Jordan had done it, why not him? So every kid in the league had the same dream. They wanted to be in the NBA. But Kobe didn't think it was a dream. He actually thought it would happen. So it was confidence at the point of delusionalism, if that's a word. Delusional. And it's often delusional until you prove everyone wrong. And years later, Sonny Vaccaro, who was one of the Nike representatives, he played a factor in Michael Jordan's career and signing up for Nike, and he did the same with Kobe, but later on for Adidas. They were returning from a media session where Bryant had performed with Jordan-like charm. In the car, Vaccaro mentioned Jordan in their conversation. Bryant leaned in to face the old, sad-eyed Italian man and remarked that he was going to be better than Jordan. He told me, "I'm going to be better than he is." The comment gave Vaccaro reason for pause. That season, a renewed 33-year-old Jordan had simply eviscerated the rest of the NBA while leading his Chicago Bulls to an all-time best 72 wins to 10 losses regular season record. In making this statement, Bryant was well aware of Vaccaro's history and success with Jordan. Although it seemed impossible, Vaccaro considered the thought that Bryant was even more confident than Jordan had been as a young player set to enter pro basketball. And it wasn't just talk. Carr said this later. It was unbelievable, but everything he said eventually came to fruition. Every single thing he said came to fruition. He was confident how he was going to be an NBA star. He was telling me that he plugged in the work and he was looking forward to becoming a Lakers star soon. So everything that, all the bold statements that he made when he was younger to Sonny Vaccaro when he was up and coming, all eventually came true. So there's this idea of law of attraction. It reminds me of Conor McGregor, because he really prized this back when he was actually fighting competitively. He spoke about the law, and law of attraction is basically speaking your vision, speaking your future into reality. So if you tell the world, it means that you'll have the confidence to kind of back it up, and the universe will kind of make it happen. And that obviously doesn't go up without hard work. I think for me, it's a point of self-belief. If you tell people your goals and your vision and what you want to achieve, it almost puts a little bit of pressure on you to back it up. And that's what Kobe did. But Kobe was confident in every sense. This is that self-belief that I was talking about. So one of the things Kobe done really well, even in his younger career, was playing these mind games on his opponents, and this sort of art of mental warfare. And this story here is quite funny. So he was playing against a rival in a few days' time, and before he did that, he picked up the phone and he called his rival, Donnie Carr, who I mentioned earlier, and he was basically just hazing him. Late that spring, Carr was on the phone with his girlfriend a few days before Carr's team was set to face Bryant's. A call waiting buzz interrupted his conversation, and Carr clicked over to take it. The voice on the line said, "Don, what's up? Who's this?" Carr inquired. "It's Kobe. What's up, man? I was just thinking I'm looking forward to the game." Bryant had heard a rumour that Catholic was losing Arthur Davis, a top 50 player who partnered with Carr in a very good Catholic backcourt. He coming. So Carr, he was 16 years old. He hung up immediately and he called his family and he couldn't believe what had just happened. The fact that Bryant was calling him and basically talking shit before the game. But it's something that he actually carried on throughout his career. So years later, when reports came out that Kobe was calling Ray Allen before NBA games to mess with his head, people were surprised, but players that had competed with him back when he was in high school, they weren't surprised at all because he'd been doing it since 1995. And it wasn't just in games, it was everything. Kobe's one of the most competitive guys that we've ever had on our team. And this is one of his Lakers trainers, Gary Vitti. He said, "To the point where when we practice and when we scrimmage and his team loses, he's uncomfortable to be around. In simple practice pickup games, he gets mad. You can't talk to him. He goes over and sits on the sideline and he's mad, really mad. That's his competitive nature. He just wants to win all the time. You need somebody like that to elevate your practices." And then Kobe said, "It's always been there since I was 4 or 5 years old. I can't explain it. You just don't feel right if you lose." So he hated losing. He absolutely hated it. And it wasn't just in games, it was in practice as well. He treated everything like a championship game. So there's a story in the book where he'd never lost a practice drill at Lower Mary in high school. He hadn't lost it in 4 years, and then one day he lost in a 3-on-3 drill. It was a tie game, and Kobe was open for a shot, and then his teammate Robbie Schwartz had the ball. Robbie wasn't a great player, but he was the last man on the team, and he's number 15. So he faked the pass to Kobe, and he took a dribble, and he missed the layup, and then the other team scored, and then Kobe lost his mind. He lost his shit. Kobe just lasered his eyes on him. For the next hour and a half, he followed him into the bathroom, to the water fountain. I thought he was going to kill him. And then Robbie Schwartz said, he was thinking, what is he doing? He's the biggest asshole. He's the biggest dick. What's the big deal? None of the coaches made a move to calm Bryant or even say anything to him. Finally, Schwartz muttered something under his breath. Enough already, or shut up. And then suddenly Bryant started for his teammate. He didn't say anything when he was running at me, Schwartz said, but he definitely lunged at me. Now I wasn't willing to stick around and find out what he was going to do. I turned around, hightailed it. I was really fast. So Kobe chased after him, and then Schwartz ran all the way to the nurse's office, which was like 200 yards away. And then he came back, and it was almost like it was normal. The coach didn't say anything to Kobe, and he was definitely the alpha in every room, in every team. He was the alpha male. But that's how he treated practice. It was like he wasn't preparing. It was like he was playing an actual championship game. So when it came to the actual championship, there was any important games or any finals, he'd already done it so many times in practice. He'd already tried all these moves. He's already played these pressure moments in his head. He'd already visualized, he used to play shadow basketball when he was in high school against his heroes like Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, players like that. So it's one of the most important things in his career is that he treated everything with 100% conviction. He was serious with everything. And that it goes to his mentality again. So 72 hours before a state semi-final that he played, he broke his nose. So a teammate, Leo Stacey, he's 5'8", he went for a steal and he headbutted Kobe right in the face. So he's bleeding. He's got this ice pack on his nose. The staff saw that he needed immediate medical treatment and led him out of the gym. His face buried in the ice pack in a big towel. As he's walking out of the gym, he calls for the ball, Schwartz said. Somebody threw him the ball. It's at the 3-point line. He was about 2 or 3 feet behind it on the left-hand side. He grabs the ball, shoots it left-handed, and swishes it as he's walking out of practice with a broken nose. That is cold, man. That is cold. So he's bleeding, his nose is shattered, he's walking out for medical treatment, and he stopped to shoot a 3-point with his left hand. Like, that is different. That is Mamba mentality, if ever there was a moment to explain it. And then Kobe said this years later about his injuries. The moment is bigger than the injury. You don't feel the pain. And this reminds me instantly of Tiger Woods. And in his book, The Difference Between Hurt and Injured, Tiger believed that if he was still mobile and he could still move about and he could still swing, then even though he was injured, he was hurt. He was hurt so he could still play. Whereas most people would say, no, you're injured, go back and recover. He would say, no, he's just hurt. Injured to him was basically being debilitated. So if he was just bedbound, he couldn't do anything. That was him being injured. So these guys have a totally different mentality when it comes to these type of things. They block out the pain and they just somehow get in the zone. And so later on in his career, Kobe was tested as well with failure. So he had his fair number of wins, but it's often failure that builds that character and eventually makes the man, makes that legend. So in May 1997, the Lakers were playing the Jazz and in the playoffs, and then Kobe was 18 years old and he shot four straight air balls in the final moments, and then the Lakers lost. So I can imagine he's 18 years old. He's just joined the Lakers team. Most teenagers would have hidden and they were sulked, they might have cried, but Kobe went straight to the gym near his house. He went to the gym that night and shot until 3 or 4 in the morning. Scoop Jackson said, "There's no crying, there's no running to lay up with some women he just met in a club. None of that shit. He went straight to the damn gym." So then after the game, reporters asked him how he'd handle it, how he'd handled that failure, and then his answer showed exactly his mentality and who he was. You've got to put it behind you. But yeah, you have to pull it out at the appropriate time. When it's summertime and you're a little tired, a little down, you're hurting and you don't feel like working out, you pull it out of your memory bank and remember the situation. Hopefully that can give me a little boost. So at that point, he's 18 years old. He already knows exactly how to turn pain into fuel. And I think that's amazing, honestly. To think about your failures and to think about your losses. And then instead of sulking and sitting in the corner and having this, loss of confidence, you say, okay, fine, that's fine, I lost, let me go work on it and let me come back and be stronger. And he did. But I just think that's such a crazy mentality to have at 18 years old, and to have that sort of wisdom to say that to the reporters as well is impressive. So one of the things I mentioned earlier on was the fact that he was a student of the game as well. So again, great story. So Kobe and Jordan didn't play many games against each other. I think they played about 3 or 4 games. They cross pass. So when Kobe was playing against the Bulls during the fourth quarter, there was a pause and play, and then Kobe walked up to Jordan and he was asking him questions, and Jordan was stunned. In the fourth quarter of the game, he asked me about my post-up move in terms of, do you keep your legs wide or do you keep your legs tight? It was kind of shocking. I felt like an old guy when he was asking me that. And that was Jordan speaking. And imagine being the greatest of that time and having this 18-year-old who Jordan already knew about, by the way, because in The Last Dance, MJ's documentary on Netflix, he spoke about it. There's a scene where he's speaking about Kobe Bryant and he's in the locker room and he's talking about this young kid. So he was already aware of him. He was already on his radar. So the fact that Kobe has the balls to go up to him and ask him questions is amazing. Like, imagine having the balls to do that and the confidence and also the humility. And then after the game, Kobe explained his thinking about the game and thinking about Jordan. I came down being aggressive. He came back at me being aggressive. That's what it's all about. All I want to do is get a hand up, try to play him hard, try different tactics on him, see how he tries to get around me. I can use it for my knowledge in the future. So he was testing Jordan to see how he'd react to Kobe, and anything that Jordan did, he was soaking that knowledge up so that he could use it in his own games. And then again, most players were too intimidated to even look at Jordan, but Kobe was asking him coaching tips mid-game. And there's not just that. There was one time where Jordan was watching him courtside, and Kobe went up to him and he asked him more questions then. So, the guy was just like a learning machine. And then another tool that he would also use was the art visualization. So I mentioned earlier that he used to do shadow basketball, so basically playing against himself, imagining him playing against his greats. But there's a great description of this in the book. For the next 6 years, young Bryant had lived his life as if on a mythical quest. The only way he could keep up the whole dream going was to work harder and harder and harder, to spin his fantasies around and around until they wrapped him tightly in a new reality. Visualization was immense for that. It drove his many hours of solitary practice time. In America, as in Italy, he took to playing entire games alone on the court in his own personal practice right before he played them for real in front of audiences. Perhaps no player has ever made more use of his imagination. Sports Illustrated said that of Kobe Bryant. And here's another thing his AAU coach said: Kobe's a genius in basketball. I think he worked to perfection. I think he studied the game harder than anyone has ever studied the game before. And when he was in Italy, there was no live TV back then, so what his family used to do, his grandparents would send game tape, and he would watch those game tapes religiously, and he would study them, and he would study everything about them. And even when he had a girlfriend, there was a story about him in high school. He had a girlfriend, they came over, and all they would do is watch game tapes, so he was obsessed with it. He was totally obsessed. So one of the problems that Kobe had in his high school, but then again in his Lakers career, that caused some friction between his teammates, and especially between him and Shaq, is probably the most famous one, was the fact that he didn't trust his teammates, and it all came from when he was in Italy. Because he'd been so much better than everyone else, he thought he had to do everything himself, and that carried over long into his career. And this is what one of his teammates said from that time. He was really selfish, Giacomo Vittori said, adding that the selfishness came from the fact that Kobe was so much better than all the other players. Everybody noticed he was the only black kid here. Everybody noticed he was very skilled. His AAU coach watched Kobe kick the ball out of bounds 7 times in a row, just trying to master a crossover move, and then in the actual game, and then the team fell behind by 16 points. And he said, finally, I was like, what the fuck? Can we win the game? Let's win the game, and you can work on whatever move you want. Because that's the next thing, we're down 12, 14, 16 points with him trying to work on a crossover move in an AAU game. That is just one of the examples that people thought he was selfish, and they would often think that he was purposely tanking games just so that he could be the star of the show. And later on, Kobe said that was ridiculous. He was always trying to win, and it's hard to believe that he'd be tanking games, but he definitely wanted to be the star of the show. So when he was in high school, he was still learning how to be a teammate. He was still learning how to be a leader. Because he was one of the best players, there was room for that. And there was one game where his coach, Greg Downer, the team was 3 for 3, and he called a meeting in the hotel room, and he went around the room defining roles, and then he turned to Kobe. Kobe, you've got to be a better teammate, and you've got to lead these guys. Then the coach turned to the team and said, you guys have no idea what it's like to be Kobe Bryant, to have this pressure on him, what he's going through, what he means to us, and what he's doing for us, and how hard he works. If you guys aren't taking his example every day, then I don't want you around anymore. And then that was a turning point. The team didn't lose again. They went on to win 27 times in a row. But learning to lead took years. And then when Kobe got to the NBA, his equipment manager, Rudy Garcia-Duenas, he said this: at the beginning of every season, you'd see it in Kobe. He'd be tremendously focused. He had spent the entire off-season getting himself into shape and working on things that he needed to work on. He tried to inspire others to do that, but he was definitely still learning his way around in a leadership role. And then one of the moments in his career was a defining moment for him, because it really showed that he was evolving. So years later, when he was, after 81 points, after championships, after proving everything, Kobe got 62 points in 3 quarters in 3 quarters against Dallas, and there was potential for him to score 80, maybe even more. Kobe looked up at the scoreboard and saw we were up by 30 or whatever, and he said, nah, I'll get it another time. Shaw recalled being stunned and angered by the response. There's not many guys who can say they got 70 points in a game. You better go back into the game. And then Kobe said, no, don't worry about it. You don't need that now. Ridiculous. The fact that he was known for being so selfish and playing his own game, and he's got a chance to create history, to score 80. Not many players have done that, and he had the opportunity and he turned it down. So the kid who's chasing teammates out of the gym for taking that final shot now sat on the bench with 62 points, and he was happy to let his team finish it. So that selfishness never disappeared, it just evolved, and he learned when not to use it and when to use it, and the moments that he did use it were, when the team needed him to. So one of the things that we not touch on is the cost and the legacy that Kobe created. So one of the things was his relentless work ethic, and here's another example of that. So when they were heading into the 3rd pro season, Kobe was training alone at the Old Forum, and Lakers played pickup games around LA, and Kobe avoided all of that. He tried to play himself, he tried to practice himself. In fact, his summer workouts were conducted almost entirely with personal trainer Joe Carbone. Alone, even though Los Angeles was known for its high-test summer pickup basketball games among top pros, Bryant simply avoided all of that to grind away on improving his game, shooting more than 1,000 shots each and every day. 1,000 shots, man, every single day is ridiculous. I mean, the mind can't even comprehend. I don't even know how long that would take, to be honest. Since he mostly worked out alone, his teammates rarely saw him developing his game. Between the obvious talent, the inexperience, and his reclusive nature, Bryant presented quite a mystery. So one of the things that Kobe didn't do too so well, he was definitely an introvert, and he didn't really have a bond with anyone in his team. No one knew about him. No one really knew about his personal life. Nobody even went to his wedding. He just wouldn't speak much about himself. He would give like one word and answers, and I think it was only later on in his career where he became a more of a in a leadership role after Shaq and after the team had sort of been revamped, where he started coming out of his shell a little bit, and he just got to gain that respect. Whereas early on in his career, he was definitely jarring to all of his teammates, and he was ruthless. So Sonny Vaccaro, who again was the Adidas representative, he championed him. He helped him reach the NBA. Like he pushed for him, and then when Kobe was done with him, it was over instantly. The relationship was done. Vaccaro said this: when Kobe left, and then when they backed off LeBron, it was a fucking death deal for Adidas. But that was Kobe's personality. He can say fuck you to anybody and not worry about it, because obviously I was nobody to him by then. But that's what he's done. He just does things and it's over. He can entirely shut you off. He had this ability just to shut people out, like immediately, like on a phone call. He would just go, okay, it's over. That's it. He's wired differently. And that ruthlessness he applied to everything: his relationships, his endorsements, teammates who couldn't keep up with him. And if you weren't helping him to get better, you were gone. And then one of the things that happened in Kobe's life was this friction between his wife Vanessa, his fiance at the time, and his mum Pam Bryant and his whole family. And because of that, Kobe literally one day cut them off from everything. So a lot of them worked, like his sisters and his brother-in-laws worked for Kobe's private company, but he shut them all off. He sacked them all. He closed everyone out. He didn't speak to his mum and dad. It was over for him, and it was because of this friction between Vanessa and his mum Pam Bryant. I think later on down the line things smoothed over a little bit, but at the time it was quite hot. Despite that, Kobe was still playing through like everything. But one of the things that affected him really was in 2000 when he came back to Philadelphia, which is kind of where he was raised. He came back as an NBA champion, but he was booed off the stage. And then he met Scoop Jackson, who was a journalist in the tunnel, and he was broken. I was the first person he saw when they booed him off stage, and he came back in the tunnel. That's when he broke down and started crying. He couldn't understand it. He kind of pulled over to the corner, and then Jackson stepped over and gave him a hug, and he said, "It's going to be all right." And then Bryant said, "Scoop, I don't understand it." And then he was just standing there literally with the trophy in his hand. Jackson recalled the city he wanted to impress so much, and he respected and loved, never forgave him for basically leaving Philadelphia. And they'd all heard the rumors as well about because that's where his dad was from, in Philadelphia. Everyone had heard the rumors about what Kobe did to his family, and they didn't forget it. They didn't forgive him for it, and they didn't forget it. And one of the other things that Kobe was working through as well, might have been after that later on in his career, was his apparently his accusation of being a rapist. Basically, at this hotel, he was accused of raping a woman, which later down the line, long story short, was proved to be false. Because apparently she had done it with two or more people from that same hotel that day, and she had a history of sort of doing this. But despite all that, he was still performing in games. He was still able to put up good games and just compartmentalize and play well. And he was upset, and that's one of the reasons for that is because he was obsessed with basketball. And if you're wondering what Kobe's work ethic actually looked like day to day, this is it. This was his schedule. Bryant preferred getting his practices out of the way in the early morning, even in the off season. So I'd be in my car at 5 in the morning, both of us coming in from Orange County to get his workouts in before dawn in the summertime, Schaefer recalled. To find an NBA player that disciplined these days, good luck with that. Schaefer would usually create an optimum program in terms of diet, strength training, conditioning, and recovery, with the hopes that a player might follow 50% of it. Nobody could achieve 100% on such programs. But Bryant was the only athlete who actually got close, both during the season and off. It was amazing, Schaefer explained. A game could end and we could fly to the next city. We'd get in, it would be 3 in the morning, and he would want me to come to do a stretch with him or something. Instead of just going to bed or whatever, he couldn't switch it off. Meanwhile, Brian Shaw pointed out that on a flight, while his teammates were sleeping, Bryant would watch the game he just played to review his and the team's performance, then watch scouting video of his next opponent, all usually before allowing himself rest. No other NBA player had come anything close to such a commitment. And that's what set Kobe apart from everyone else. Like, he had a different mentality. He was truly obsessed. All he could think of was basketball and becoming better at basketball in his training and his studying. And that was the difference between him and Jordan as well, actually. Schaefer said this: the most dedicated athlete I've ever worked with by far, adding that Jordan had a similar discipline to Bryant, but no one came close in terms of the daily grind that Bryant chose. If Jordan had a couple of poor shooting games in a row, when Schaefer arrived for work at the Bulls facility in the morning, he could hear his star in the gym putting up shots. But that was different. So Kobe worked all the time, whereas Jordan only worked when he needed to. Jordan was different as well, don't get me wrong. He had his own incredible work ethic, but there's definitely a difference between the two. Like, if you just watch interviews of Jordan, watch his documentary, and watch Kobe, Kobe's almost he had a psychopathic, like, tendency for basketball. Like, he just loved it and he loved practice, and that's all he could do. Whereas Jordan loved, the different. He liked enjoying the different fruits of his labor. So he liked, going out, going to casinos. He was a big gambler. He liked playing card games at night. So there was a difference between the two, and it wasn't just Schaefer who Kobe impressed. In the 2008 Olympics, Team USA arrived in a new city very early in the morning, and everyone went to their rooms to sleep. And then when Dwayne Wade showed up to practice the next day, he found Kobe sitting down, and he was completely drenched in sweat. And then Dwayne Wade asked, "What were you doing?" And then Bryant said, "I'm on my second workout already." And then Dwayne was confused. He was like, he was on his second workout before anyone else had even showed up. That's when I knew he was a different beast. It told me about his work ethic and his will to be great. The example inspired him and others on the team. Wade said, "I had always been a hard worker myself. I never slacked in that category. But you understand why a guy is that great when you see things like that." It was Bryant's own sort of mind game too, a challenge thrown down and on display for his teammates. It violated the idea of cool that often enveloped the sport, even at his highest levels, and stuffed the notion, never let them see you sweat. Bryant was the antithesis of that. He put his sweat on display for his Olympic teammates, and he done it proudly. Dwayne Wade was already known as one of the hardest workers in NBA as well, but even he was stunned. And it wasn't just Dwayne Wade, it was the rest of the team as well. Bryant's impact on the team would be felt from the first moment of the team's first practice in Las Vegas. LeBron James had come down from his room in the team hotel and was headed for the team bus to go to practice when he saw a thoroughly drenched Bryant emerging from the weight room. He had been working for hours before practice, and then James thought, so that's what he's all about. And then according to Chris Dennis, who advised LeBron James earlier in his career, Kobe in his first practice was diving on the floor. That set the tone. Bryant's Olympic experience would allow him to heavily influence a generation of players. Colangelo said, in the weight room, he set the tone for a lot of players. They saw him doing it. They started going in and doing the extra work. There's no doubt about the fact that he made a major contribution to USA basketball. That's really interesting, actually, that he was an example for players in the weight room, because, again, Tiger, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but Tiger did the exact same. He was one of the first in his generation to actually incorporate weight training into his routine, and I mean, it did benefit him, but it also came to his detriment as well, because he took it far too seriously, because he was on another level as well in terms of his obsession and improvement. But they were both game changers, and they were both sort of revolutionised and evolved the sport and how you prep for it. But similar to Tiger, his body paid the price for not just his weight training and his training, but just his extensive play of basketball since he was a baby. Kobe, he didn't just play through his injuries well. He tried to prepare for them as well. He did what he could to recover between games. He would use knee braces. He would use a kinesio tape. He would use calf stretch. He would ice baths, ice packs on his knees. And then before games, he would use a numb injection as well for his wrist. Bryant approached competition as a veritable MASH unit, complete with a numbing injection for the wrist before games. He was able to keep playing with a broken wrist because doctors determined that the bones were not out of alignment. And then here's another example of Kobe just playing through pain and having the ability to just stay in the zone and block it out. Just incredible mentality. And April 12, 2013, the Lakers were playing the Warriors, and Kobe had already played 44 minutes, and he pushed off to the left against Harrison Barnes, and his Achilles snapped. He drew the foul, and then he did something nobody expected. So his Achilles is snapped at this point, bear in mind. Pau Gasol said he had seen many things out of his teammate over the years, but nothing like what happened next. As Bryant, racked with pain and agony, insisted on taking the free throws, then walked off the floor under his own power. And then coach Mike D'Antoni said this: the fact that he went back out on the floor with a torn Achilles and walked up there and sank 2 foul shots and walked off. I mean, most people would have to be carted away in an ambulance, but he walked up there and made the 2 foul shots. I mean, the guy was unbelievable. So most players need an ambulance at that point, and there was a point, I don't know if it was in The Last Dance or if there was another documentary that I was reading, but Kobe done that to make a point because there were other players who were stretchered off after having a torn Achilles, where this guy's just wobbling about, walking off as if he's not in pain. And if you watch the actual video, you look at his face and he's just stone cold. You can see he's sweating. He's clearly in pain, but he's not showing any of that weakness to any of his teammates. So there's the idea of constantly chasing the zone, which came from when he was at the Lakers, when Phil Jackson brought George Mumford to the Lakers to teach meditation. And then Kobe was fascinated by one thing, and it was the ability to get into the zone. And that basically meant moments when an athlete entered an altered state of performance. Bryant was fascinated because among the many things the psychologist explored were those magical moments when an athlete entered the zone. To Mumford's amazement, during his time working with Jordan, Chicago star almost seemed to have at his command an ability to jack himself almost routinely into that rare altered state of performance, far beyond what could be achieved by any other person Mumford had encountered. And Mumford had roomed with Julius Erving at the University of Massachusetts, which is another legend which I'll be reading about at some point. So Jordan had learned to enter this zone almost routinely, and that's what separated him from everyone else Mumford had worked with, including Dr. J. And Kobe wanted that. He studied it and he trained with it. So when George Mumford and Phil Jackson came to Lakers, he ate that shit up. He learned it, he studied it, and he tried to embody it. So going on to Kobe's final game, it was on April 13, 2016. He was 37 years old in his final game of his career, and the Lakers were trailing by 14 in the fourth quarter. And how I just spoke about the zone, this is the best example of entering that zone, because Kobe done it one last time, and people could not believe it. I can't believe this actually happened, to be honest with you, he would explain later. Neither could the Jazz. A lot of us were in shock, and this is Utah's, one of the coaches saying it. Kobe Bryant scored 60 points at age 37. He outscored the entire Jazz team in the fourth quarter, 23 points to 21 that they scored all by himself. No other NBA player scored 60 points in the entire 2015-2016 season. Only 31 times since 1963 had anyone scored 60 points. Just 8 times in the previous 11 seasons, Kobe owned 5 of them. So to get it, he took 50 shots, made 22, took 21 threes, and made 6. So he shot, less than half of the shots that he took, and it just goes to one of Michael Jordan's quotes as well, the fact that he took thousands of shots over his career and he's failed so many times. But that's why he won. Then Kobe said this: my teammates were just continuing to encourage me, continuing to say, shoot, shoot, shoot. It's like reversed. You go from being the villain to now being some type of hero, and then going from everybody saying pass the ball to shoot the ball. It's really strange. In Los Angeles, fans stood, laughed, cried, and they reached the sky for joy. In China, 110 million people watched for a regular season game. Because why? Because it was Kobe Bryant's final game. And there are not many athletes, not many legends who go out on a high. A lot of them, come back. Like Michael Jordan ended on a high, but then he came back and played for the Washington Wizards, and then he ended on a low. So, what Kobe Bryant did to leave on such a high, it reminds me of Alistair Cook. Totally different sport now, cricket. But he left by scoring, 100 in his final game, and not many players can do that. Not many athletes can put on that performance one last time and leave in such a high note. And the fact that Kobe did it, I say I'm so happy for him, because he gave that great memory for all of the fans. And I'm not a basketball fan myself. I'm a fan of legends, and one thing that you can truly appreciate is what Kobe Bryant left for the game and his legacy. And I'll just tell you some of the numbers that he finished with. So, 5 NBA championships, 2 finals MVPs, 1 regular season MVP, 18 All-Star selections, 81 points in a single game, second most in NBA history, and 33,643 career points, fourth of all time, and then 20 seasons with one franchise. That's 20 years. And as many of you know, he died in a helicopter crash. I'll be surprised if anyone listening to this doesn't know. But that was in January 26, 2020, alongside his daughter, Gianna, and 7 others. He's 41 years old. It's honestly really sad. When I read the book, just the fact that he's no longer alive made it a little bit more important. It made it a little bit more, a little bit more upsetting, because the fact that he's not, because everything that I look for, anytime I read about an athlete, I look at what they're doing today and, their any recent interviews that they took. But for Kobe Bryant, I mean, it was not many years ago, but still, there's no recent interviews. So, his last interview, I think it was actually with Jay Shetty, maybe. And he was, at the end of his career, he was actually just going about and he was trying to develop women's basketball and just trying to raise the game. He was trying to be an ambassador, and he was giving all these interviews into insight into that sort of Mamba mentality. And there's so many quotes that I could pull out from him. I'll definitely save it for another video, but I'll end it with this comparison between Jordan and Kobe. And again, it's just one take. It's Tex Winter's take. He coached both of them, and he spent years thinking about what separated them. And this is what he says. Tex Winter, a coach who played a major role in Jordan's career and who eventually became Bryant's mentor, would often spend time contemplating the comparisons between the two players and the sources of their greatness. There were many differences, but the main difference, the coach concluded, was that Jordan spent 3 years in college learning how to play a team game under a highly structured coach, Dean Smith. That background prepared Jordan to achieve his later greatness with the Chicago Bulls. Winter developed a tremendous affinity for Bryant and admired so much about his unflinching dedication, but he also came to believe that Bryant's lack of college experience was ultimately the thing that kept him from his goal of being the unquestioned greatest of all time. So the debates will never end. I mean, was he greater than Jordan? Was he better than LeBron James? Who's better between LeBron James and Michael Jordan? And then you have Steph Curry in the mix as well. Who knows what would happen if he went to college? I mean, it could be, did his isolation cost him more championships than his college experience? Who knows? But then there's a caveat to everything. His isolation is one of the things that made him great. It was one of the things that made him practice as much as he did on his own from when he was a young kid. So even in the NBA, the people who battled him said the most separating trait wasn't just skill. For admirers such as Popovich, who had a full understanding of what allowed a singular player like Bryant to stand far above so many others, the essence was his mental toughness and a willingness and an ability to accept responsibility on a night after night basis. That's what really separates the great players like Kobe from the rest. There are a lot of good players in the NBA, but they're spotty. They'll produce like every third night, but it takes a special mental toughness and a feeling of responsibility to your group to want to do it night after night after night. And that's what separates Kobe. Tim Duncan, Popovich's partner in so many great battles against Bryant, identified the same quality. It's his competitive nature, the way he can bring it every night. He wants to be the best. He wants to be the best every single night. And that's something that nobody can argue about. No one ever worked harder, I think, in the NBA. Honestly, everything that I've read, I mean, I read about all the other basketball greats as well, but from what I'm reading, between the difference between him and Jordan and him and everyone else is that he really wanted it. He wanted it more than anyone else. He worked so hard, and nobody will ever forget the kid who said he'd be better than Jordan, because that's what he did. He said very early on that he'd be better than Jordan, and he spoke it into reality. And he spent every single day of his life trying to prove it. And I think that's what's so special about his mentality, and that's the definition of the Mamba mentality, is competitive nature. And that phrase that constantly rang in his ear when he was younger and throughout his career about never being the man. He didn't want to be like his dad, Jellybean. He wanted to be much better. He wanted to be the greatest of all time, and he again had milestones that he wanted to achieve, and in my eyes he achieved them. Whether he's the greatest basketball player of all time, I don't know. I'll leave that to the fanatics, the people who actually watch basketball on a day-to-day basis. But for me, when it comes to work ethic, No one can match him. So, thank you for listening to my podcast. Again, if you want to find out more, I would highly recommend this book, The Showboat, Life of Kobe Bryant by Roland Lazenby. He also wrote a book on Michael Jordan as well, which is on my reading list. So, yeah, again, thank you for listening. That's one legend down. The work continues.